sessions and to be also back in Bilbao. I've been invited in the past at several occasions by the Basque Parliament to discuss protection of defenders, and we discussed with the Parliament the possibility for the Basque Country to also support additional defenders in the so-called shelter cities, which is a very good support for defenders outside. I've also seen the list of participants, and I recognized, and panelists, I'm happy to also recognize an aspiring audience, recognizing friends, allies, colleagues from different countries that I've met during different country missions, NGOs, but also that I met in Geneva. Good also, Felipe, to be also invited by one university, because I think, and I'll provide you with additional material, universities are a good place to support also special rapporteurs, and in my new capacity I would need also the backing and the support of as many universities as possible. And also good to touch base also with academics that have been also supporting my mandate, like Alice and Manfred. Happy to see you again here, and many others. Not to mention also Kike, who has been so a source of inspiration for my mandate at many occasions, and sometimes we discuss also the content and the themes of my thematic report with him. It was also very helpful to provide backing support and inspiration for those reports. So again, I'm honored to be there for the invitation, and sorry not being able to be with you since the very beginning. I was, as you may already know, in Tallinn at the Open Government Partnership Summit in Estonia, where together with a group of NGOs and the support of key allies governments, we are trying to launch a new initiative. Norway is part of the game, Mexico, Brazil and others, Indonesia, to support better climate activists as we now approach the next COP28 in Dubai. And I would be happy to tell you more, if you so wish, after the presentation. As you know, I've been appointed to this new mandate only a couple of months ago. A new mandate which is fully dedicated to the protection of environmental defenders, including climate activists under the Aarhus Convention. And as the mandate is very new and deserves to be better understood and presented, I thought I would spend a couple of minutes to share with you this new mandate. Would be interesting also for you to understand how you could seize the mandate if you see that your colleagues, defenders in many places are at risk, because the mandate has been created precisely to protect defenders, but also to prevent the risks that they occur in so many countries. This is, in fact, a rapid response mechanism which has been created under the form of a special rapporteur. And the idea when states discussed the possibility was to complement what they call the compliance committee. With the Aarhus Convention, you have a compliance committee composed of experts, and the work of the compliance committee is to look at how states would comply with the main provision of the convention, and it's a legally binding instrument, this Aarhus Convention. But as many defenders decided to put complaints before the compliance committee, it's not the place to deal with those complaints, because the compliance committee is a sort of quasi-judicial body which takes time to deal with complaints. So they said it's better to create a new mechanism, and that's how in 2021 states decided to create this new mandate under the form of special rapporteur dedicated to the protection of the environmental defenders and climate activists. It has been created as a new mechanism, in fact, in addition to the compliance committee, but anchored in the Aarhus Convention, which has been adopted, as you know, in 1998. I mean, as you know, but many people don't know really the Aarhus Convention. I invite you to read this convention. That's an amazing instrument on which we could also do more. 1998, that's precisely the year in which the UN Declaration has been adopted as well. So you see the possibilities offered by the two anniversaries. I am supported by, the mandate is supported by a team which is based in Geneva. It's based not with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, like other mandate holders, but it's supported by UNEC, which is the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And like for the Escazú Agreement, which is similar for the Americas, it's based on three pillars. The first is access to information. whenever a government or company is thinking of establishing a new activity or developing a new activity that might impact the environment of a community, then it's compulsory for the state or for the company to inform the people affected by the project. Consult doesn't mean only to post on a website information, but to organize consultations by which they would share the main information in all languages so that the communities could understand better what is at stake and how the project could also affect or sometimes put in danger large communities of people outside the country. The second pillar, which is complementary, is public participation. And again, whenever a company or a state decide to create a new activity, a new program, a new business in a country, then public participation is mandatory. And they have to broadly consult in a proper manner communities that might be affected by the project so that they also have the possibility to give a say. And to give a say means also to say no to a project if they think that the project could be a disaster for communities and for indigenous people. And the last pillar, which is very complementary and currently very actual, that's environmental justice. Meaning that when the rights of the convention have been violated, lack of consultation, lack of information, then communities or individuals have a right to go to justice, either administrative justice or judicial system, to seek for reparation and redress. So that's very innovative, in fact, and it was at the time very innovative, and we need now to explore the way how we could use this convention. It has been ratified by 47 states so far, including the EU, which has, and we'll see, important implications for the EU because the European Investment Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development are also, as I say, bound by the main provision of this convention, so that's also huge implications. Unlike the Escazú Agreement, which is a regional agreement, the Aarhus Convention is a universal convention, open to any states. And recently, one state in Africa, Guinea-Bissau, decided to join the convention, is now a party, and other states in Africa, like Gabon, for instance, Côte d'Ivoire, states in Asia, Mongolia has shown an interest to also join the convention, are also considering their accession to the convention. So it's a universal convention that's open to accession to any states. And the beauty, if I may say so, of this mandate, and I liked this beauty of the mandate, is that in addition to the 47 states, meaning that I'm able to speak to 47 states, the mandate has what we call an extra territorial scope, by which when a company based in one of the countries that are party to the Aarhus Convention puts defenders at risk operating abroad, then defenders from these countries are able to seek protection for the mandate. Let me give you some concrete examples, current examples. We have companies in Spain doing palm oil industry in Latin America and in Colombia and Peru, elsewhere, affecting defenders, deforestation, threats, things alike. The defenders from those countries could seek protection from my mandate. I'm not able to speak to the countries themselves, but I'm able to speak to the CEO of the companies using the same working methods as other reporters, which has a big effect. You will see later on why. And another example for France, Total Energy doing harm to defenders in Uganda, Tanzania. Then defenders from Uganda, Tanzania can also give an access to me, and I can send communications to states to speak of the situation. We have many cases also in other countries. We have cases in Switzerland, we have cases in Norway as well, and cases in Germany and UK. So all countries that are party to the convention that operate abroad and are doing harm to defenders, then defenders from the countries could come to me to seek protection. And that's a message that we and you need to also share with your colleagues in Asia, in Africa, or Latin America. If you are aware or cases by which communities, indigenous people, environmental defenders, climate activists might be affected by international companies based in one of the parties to the Aarhus Convention, then they are eligible to the protection for the mandate. And that's also the case if defenders or communities are affected by projects funded or guaranteed by the two EU banks, the European Investment Bank or the European Development Bank. When defenders are affected by a project funded by the banks, then defenders could also seek protection, and I'm able to speak to the banks on how they should pay better attention to the defenders. And as you know all too well, international companies are far more dangerous for defenders and communities and states. And this extra territorial scope of the mandate is precisely one of the areas for which I would like to have the backing and the support of academics, Felipe, to continue to unpack the concept, to develop the concept with my team, to see the implication it may have for the work I'm going to develop. That's a new mandate. I'm developing the working method, the tools, and I lead the backing of the universities to develop and unpack the concept. Same working methods as other rapporteurs. I'm using the same. I've been another mandate before, so I know pretty well how it works. When I receive a communication coming from a community or a defender affected or at risk, then I'm sending what we call a letter of allegation, and the name speaks for itself. It doesn't mean that we accuse the states of wrongdoing. We simply receive allegation, we share the allegation for the states, and ask the state to comment on those allegations, and then the letter and the response of the state is posted on the website of the mandate, and you, if you so want, you can have an access already to some communication sent to some states. We do the same with companies, and we have already on the website communication states to send to companies, like in Ireland, but also companies operating in Guatemala and in Colombia. I'm also using, as other rapporteurs, urgent actions when life is at risk, so we cannot wait the 60 days of confidentiality. When life is at risk, then I would issue immediately a press release using my social media to raise awareness on the fact that I've been informed, alerted that something is happening in what country, so that the state would be also understanding that they might receive a communication. Another beauty of the mandate is that I'm also allowed to do unannounced country visits. That's something which is rare for rapporteurs, because, Manfred, you know pretty well that states would refuse to invite us because they don't want to see a report before the UN. With this mandate, I can simply travel to a country saying I'm traveling to Kyrgyzstan or to Armenia, to any place, and then speaking to the government. I don't need the consent of the government. The limitation is that they know that there won't be a report, but at least they know that something is going to happen after my visit, at least press releases and strong communications, and I'm sure that the NGOs of those countries would be able to relay also my information. Quiet diplomacy, that's something that we very often use, speaking to embassies in Geneva, speaking to embassies in New York, to raise awareness on the situation of defenders. The other added value of the mandate is that it is, as I said, anchored in this Aarhus Convention, which is a legally binding instrument, which has huge implication for the mandate itself, but also for states. And again, Felipe, that's another area of research for which the support of academics will be needed. What does it mean, in fact, to have the mandate of a special rapporteur attached to a legally binding instrument? What does it mean if states would not comply with my recommendations while the mandate is a legal binding instrument? What sort of implication would it have for the states? And I'm planning to organize in the first weeks of 2024 an expert seminar with a view to explore and discuss more in depth those implications, and happy to invite you guys if you are interested. So yesterday you discussed very interesting topics like who is afraid of defenders. And this is really an interesting question, and it's too bad that I missed this discussion. I would have loved to hear testimonies and stories coming from different places. And today I would like to also add another question to the discussion: how do we know that they are afraid of defenders? The response is very simple. It's because we see the signals. We know the signals, and those signals are also, for me, warning signals. In my capacity, I've been traveling in many places since I've been appointed with this mandate, and I've seen so many states presenting defenders, including Europe, as enemies. You know pretty well how they call them: threat to public order, threat to national security, enemies of tradition, anti-progress, against development, against peaceful society. And environmental defenders and climate activists are also, in many ways, labeled as eco-terrorists. They are called Talibans. They are called Green Khmers by ministers or politicians in France, in UK, in Austria, in Germany, in Italy, and in Spain. We see, and I see myself, an increasing use of counter-terrorism measures and the establishment of new laws, new legislations to restrict freedoms by preventing civil disobedience, for instance, in Italy, in Germany, in UK, in Spain, and discussions are ongoing in other countries, like in Austria. And in most EU countries, in fact, judges and courtrooms ignore simply civil disobedience, which is recognized by international human rights law. And I've myself monitored trials in at least 2 countries, tried to explain to judges that there are international obligations and that the state is bound by those obligations, but they simply don't know international law and they ignore, like for instance, Manfred, the General Comment 37 of the Human Rights Committee on the right to peaceful assembly, which states, and I'm quoting, collective civil disobedience or direct action campaigns can be covered by Article 21 of the Covenant, provided that they are non-violent, in fact. So judges and judicial systems ignore completely those provisions. And more generally, I'm also concerned by the fact that those climate activists and environmental defenders operating in EU countries are never recognized by their own governments as defenders. And they never get the same attention as their colleagues in other countries that are supported by EU missions or by country missions. What's happening in EU countries is for me a shame. So in that context, what are the challenges, the potential, and the way forwards? Tell me if I'm too long. In terms of challenges for the future, I see that you already have discussed this topic at large during your conference, but I would like to highlight a few elements from my own observations and recent travels in Europe and consultations with defenders. I'm going to probably repeat what you already know, what you have already said, but from my own experience, and that's the case also for Manfred, it resonates in a different manner when it comes from a special rapporteur speaking to states or speaking to companies. First, the killings. That is something which is appalling, and in a couple of days, the latest report from Global Witness will be presented. It's next week on the 12th of September, and the data are still appalling, with, again, one defender killed every other day. One defender killed every other day. Almost 1,390 of these killings taking place since the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015. Can you imagine? And what environmental defenders, including climate activists, told me since I've been appointed with this new mandate is that they see that, including their field of competence, civic space is more and more shrinking for most of them, including in some of the most democratic countries, with more bans on demonstration on climate, more attempts to prevent new forms of mobilizations, more forms of attacks against defenders, with a clear lack of democratic dialogue and participation. And discussing with grassroots organizations in Italy, in Spain, in France, in Denmark, I see the also increasing use of counter-terrorist measures to criminalize environmental defenders, including those who are fighting for the future of our planet, with new forms of surveillance, more preventive arrests, more prolonged detention in Europe. Yes, this is a rising trend that we see, including in Western Europe, against environmental defenders, including climate activists in countries like France, again, Denmark, Italy, Switzerland, UK, and others. I have myself also received worrying testimonies and sometimes evidences of surveillance, harassment, including with police officers and media infiltrating climate movements, and sometimes also law firms undercover. Recently in Spain, we got testimonies, but also in UK. I've also witnessed, as you already know, the increasing use of slaps against organizations, which has, as you know, a very direct chilling effect on those who are facing those threats and risk when they try to oppose mega projects. And we have sent recently communications on SLAP to Armenia and to Kyrgyzstan. And I've also seen how states are able to copy-paste bad practice of the police to target and to penalize environmental defenders trying to exercise the right to peacefully protest. Yes, the picture is very grim, and I'm sure that you already all share the same feeling, that that is something that you already discussed at length during the 2 days, but I'm still hopeful, and we have a duty to also be hopeful and to convey a message of hope to defenders. Why? Because we have now the tools to better protect defenders. We have the existing mechanism at the UN with new special rapporteurs on environment and climate, but also with the African Commission, the Inter-American Commission, OSCE, the Council of Europe for Europe. Special rapporteurs work more together. They know how to better work together, to create better synergies, to do joint action, joint activities. The next inter-mechanism meeting, which is a meeting by which the UN Special Rapporteur invites the colleagues from other regional organizations, the Special Rapporteur of the African Commission, the Special Rapporteur of the Inter-American Commission, the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe, and myself will have our next meeting dedicated fully to the protection of environmental defenders and climate activists with a view to design joint activities, but also joint strategies. We have, as you know, the extraordinary network of Protect Defenders, very useful, the powerful Lifeline Consortium, the many foundations, and defenders have created their own regional and national networks. Women defenders have also their own networks. National mechanisms are also improving in some countries, have been established in Mexico, Colombia, Honduras, Brazil, Mongolia recently, and Côte d'Ivoire. And we have an increasing number of shelter cities that are ready to host defenders at risk, including in Africa with the network of Ubuntu cities. And universities and research centers are more and more connected with the UN and with mechanism. Some research centers are already focusing their work on defenders, providing data, analyzing legislations, preparing report for special rapporteurs, and for my part, Alice and the York Center has been very useful to help me to prepare some of my thematic reports, so we need to increase cooperation between UN special rapporteurs and universities. Defenders and communities are also better connected worldwide with the support of numerous international organizations. They identify themselves similar challenges. They share ideas, best practices and tools, and they know how to better address challenges together. Just to give you an example, in a recent workshop that I organized in Paris in July, I met with 17 young climate activists from different countries, and they all pointed out the fact that the repression that they are facing in their countries in Europe are similar to the repression that other defenders working on other rights, like women's rights and migrants' rights, are facing. I see that, Felipe, time is running. I don't want to be too long, but I would like to conclude with a few reflections, if time permits. First, on prevention, which is for me a key element. That's for me the best way to deal with violations. We should request governments and the embassies to do more. And if you all read the reports prepared by special rapporteurs to the UN, my predecessors and myself and my successor, Marie Laurent, they all contain specific provisions on prevention. But the problem is that most of them are not implemented. We send communication recommendations to states asking them to do more on prevention with concrete element guidance to states, and they simply ignore those recommendations. So we need to push governments to look at those recommendations, to read again the report, to discuss together the recommendations on prevention, and to at least implement some of them. They are still valid and they are not implemented. The same also applies to UN agencies or even the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. That also sometimes simply does not implement or ignore resolutions from the Council dedicated to human rights defenders. I'm thinking, and if you have time to look into this resolution, the 2019 resolution on environmental defenders, requesting all UN agencies to develop their own strategies and program on defenders. And until now, only UNEP and UN Women have developed a proper strategy to protect defenders. None of the other programs and agencies have started to work on this. On participation, we also need to push governments to formally include environmental defenders from the outset when they start to prepare the different COP meetings, and to include those defenders also in their official delegations. And when it's for the COP, at least to invite also young climate activists to be part of the game, and not only to be there only for the COP meeting, but to include them in the negotiations on the outcome document. Because, as you know all too well, participation of defenders is a key element of their protection. And we cannot accept that governments discuss the future of our planet and adopt, as I said, the outcome document without a full and formal participation of those who are directly affected by those decisions. But I also see, and that's for me a matter of concern and discussion for the team and myself, that unfortunately a number of human rights organizations still work too isolated and too much in silos. Speaking in Geneva with the mainstream human rights organizations, we see that they do not work enough with those working on environment, on climate, on biodiversity, on environment. How many human rights NGOs try to prepare the specialized COP, the climate COP, what we call the triple planetary crisis is one of the greatest challenges to human rights and to sustainable development, now and in the future. And this is why we all need to make sure that we break those silos to build bridges and to learn to better work together. We cannot, of course, be on all fronts, but we know that all fronts need to be covered, which means that all countries need to be monitored, that all rights need to be addressed, that no group of victims is left without protection, especially women defenders and children defenders. We also have to bridge the gap between what we call standards and practice, which means identifying the gaps in international laws, lobbying for new convention if needs be, and treaties, campaigning for ratification, including for the Aarhus Convention, and also following up on the legislative change in countries on the institutional development and local mechanism, monitoring implementation, reporting abuses, and calling for an end to impunities. To conclude, another request to university, we need to collect more data. And that's how universities can help us, help me with this new data. Data on impunity, research and publications to support the team of special rapporteurs when they are preparing reports, thematic reports. The research for instance, in my case, to, as I said, to unpack concept and other complex concept I want to unpack is the clause of violence in the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. How, for the mandate, to draw a line between violence and what we call a symbolic act of sabotage. Is sabotage an acceptable form of violence for the mandates? That's a long discussion that I have with my team when I'm receiving communications or requests for action from defenders. Is, for instance, trespassing private property is an act of violence if it is done to run a symbolic action of civil disobedience? So all sorts of questions that we need also to discuss together, and I very much welcome the support and the backing of universities. This is for me all part of the same continuum, and they should all be covered adequately. Thank you very much. Sorry for being too long.